Hello, good afternoon, woman of God, my fellow PBM members. My name is LaDonna, and I'm doing this in obedience to what the woman of God has asked. So, the title of what I wrote is it's just a little bit of summary of what we were reading yesterday, Acts chapter 9. The title that I've given it is God's Emergency Services. So, in chapter 9, when we begin to read chapter 9, Apostle Paul, then known as Saul, was spearheading a hunt for all Christians with no doubt that he wanted to punish them for what they believe in. And the punishment back in the day was either they would get their hands, what do you call them, crushed by stones, or they would get a flogging. If you watch Passion of Christ, you know how they were beating Christ. That was one of the punishments. And it could also lead to death, like Steve the martyr, who was stoned to death. Now, on his way to Damascus, God intercepted Saul. And in no doubt, I think this is the first response, the first emergency response God does, because this was in response to all the Christians that were crying out, Lord Jesus, he's coming. Lord, he's coming to us now. We're going to die. And I believe God responded to that. And I don't know why the word domestic violence, like this was a domestic violence, keeps coming to me. Because all I know of domestic violence is once the call is made and it's classed as a domestic violence, it gets tumbled up to the right people who are equipped to deal with domestic violence, because it knows domestic violence is a sensitive topic. And that just blows my mind that this issue was connected and pushed over until it got to God, and God had to come and intercede himself to say, Saul, why do you persecute me? And the thing that really struck me about that first meeting is the light came and he was surrounded by light. And the first thing he did is jump off his horse, and he was trembling on the ground in fear. And then when God said, Saul, why do you persecute me? His response was, who are you, Lord? Even that just struck me, like, the title Lord, it's a title of respect that's given to people. So for me is, how was he responding, who are you, Lord, if he didn't know who Lord was? Even the question, who are you, Lord, becomes redundant because he knew who it was. That's why he was down on the ground trembling. Now the second thing, like in Acts, verse 9, he goes in an automatic dry fast. 3 days dry fast, which, I feel like this was where he was getting cleansed, getting right with God. And then in verse 11, I'll read that. In verse 11, this is where God sends Ananias. Get up and go to the street called Straight, the Lord said to him, to the house of Judas, and ask for a man from Tarsus named Saul, since he is praying there. Now, I know this is where this whole Acts 9:11 is revolved around, but the words that struck to me was Straight Street. Why even mention the name of the street? Because this is God, and this vision that he gave him was already so detailed. He could have just told him, go straight, turn right, turn left, then you arrive to the place where the man is that is praying. But he told him to go to the place called Straight Street. to the place called Straight Street, which I believe was not a mistake, because I believe the word Straight Street is a double entendre. Sorry, my English is no good, but it's a double entendre. The first meaning, Straight Street, is the obvious meaning that it's a street called straight. I believe the second meaning of Straight Street is we need to be right with God. Like Paul was in a place where he was getting right with God. Now, 3 lessons that I learned from this little summary was, first of all, God responds to emergencies in a spectacular way. He will cause your enemies to serve him. They will even come to you and ask you, how do we live this godly life? How they will come for advice to you to do this church walk. The second lesson, I believe, is we need to be right with God. Living on a straight street, walking on a straight and narrow. That is, we need to spend time with God, reading his word and just talking to him. it's then in when we're talking and communing with him, he will reveal to us how we should live. Lastly, we need to obey God, like Ananias. um, he had heard of all the treacherous things that Saul was doing, and God only had to tell him, this is the way I want it, and he obeyed. No doubt he had to probably test the spirit several times because this was his life we're talking about. But in all instances, he still obeyed. And I keep wondering, will you forsake all for Christ? Yeah, that's my little summary. Thank you for listening.